Frank Abagnale Jr. Before Johnny Sins became the king of role switching, there was Frank Abagnale Jr., the original master of disguise. This guy changed his career every week, but added a dash of scamming to it. At just 16, Frank was already conning people for free flights, posing as an airline pilot. But he didn't stop his career there. He convinced people he was a doctor, lawyer, and college professor. It was like watching a one-man show with a cast of dozens because he could play different roles perfectly. Frank's secret was his forgery skills, which could put a photocopying machine to shame. Back when Photoshop wasn't a thing in the 1960s, he was crafting fake IDs and checks. But his silver tongue was his real superpower, sweet-talking his way into many freebies. He wasn't just doing it for the fun of it, instead he made a career out of conning people. But not even Frank's bluffing skills could outrun the FBI. They finally caught and locked him up. Still, his words were far too sweet for the feds. He convinced them to release him so that he could work as an asset to bust other conmen, basically fighting fire with fire. Today, Frank Abagnale Jr. is a legitimate security consultant. He uses his knowledge of scams to prevent people from being scammed. Charles Ponzi. Charles Ponzi was the Michael Jordan of scamming. MJ had an entire shoe brand named after him. Ponzi had a scamming scheme named after him. In the 1920s, he devised the ultimate get-rich-quick plan that had folks coming in like flies to a light bulb. He was promising people a 50% return in just 90 days. You'd probably say this sounds familiar. Well, that's because you see this everywhere today, but in the 20s, this scheme was the new kid on the block, even though Ponzi's promises were far too good to be true. Instead of investing their money wisely, he just shuffled them around. For example, if you gave him $100 today, he pays you $150 90 days later. But he got his money by attracting more investors. So basically, he was using the money he got from his new investors to pay his old ones. Soon, everyone was talking about this Ponzi and his new strategy. It was as if he was the next coming of Jesus Christ. But instead of making miracles, he was making idiots out of his investors. But it all came crashing down on him when he ran out of new investors to pay his old ones. When he realized he was in deep water, he must have been, "Oh no, I'm screwed." Investors lost fortunes, and Ponzi found himself a fancy new room in jail. His name is now etched forever in the Hall of Fame of scams as the unquestioned greatest of all time. A century later, people still haven't learned, because Ponzi's legacy lives on in con men who think that they could still make suckers out of people. Victor Lustig. If you can sell the Eiffel Tower, you should win the Con Artist of the Century award. That was how Victor Lustig became a legend in the early 1900s. Lustig's claim to fame was trying to sell off France's most famous landmark. In the 1920s, he forged government papers and summoned a few scrap metal dealers for a secret meeting. He spun a tale about dismantling the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal. He demanded bribes from the scrap metal dealers, promising them they would get the demolition gig. One sucker took the bait, only to find out that France had no plans of putting down its most famous phallic symbol. Meanwhile, Lustig skipped town with a bunch of money in his pockets. He lived large, gambling off his ill-gotten money and buying the finer things in life. But when he ran out of cash, he continued his career of spinning cons. For example, he tried selling a box that supposedly duplicated cash. He was a master at fooling people. If he tried, he would even manage to sell a freezer to an Eskimo. But he got caught for counterfeiting in New York. Still, he got away from the cops by making a key out of a toilet pipe, basically turning a bathroom break into a jailbreak. He got caught again 27 days later. This time, there was no sweet-talking his way out of prison. Lustig eventually died in jail, but enjoyed a few perks in prison because he was simply too good with his words. Anna Sorokin. You know the famous saying, faking it till you make it? In Anna Sorokin's case, she faked it until they slapped handcuffs on her wrists. Known as Anna Delvey, this fine young lady went to New York City in 2013 and immediately dove into high society. She enjoyed luxury hotels and fine dining while rubbing shoulders with the elite. She was so convincing she could have won an Oscar for Best Performance as a trust fund baby. The entire time, she played the part of a rich German heiress with millions in trust funds in the bank. She had everyone fooled, even though her credit card kept getting declined. But that wasn't a problem because she would just borrow cash from her rich friends, promising to pay them once her German cash arrived. But she never once paid a single dime for her hotel suites, $100 steak dinners, and expensive cocktails. She got so ambitious that she tried landing a $22 million loan from the bank for a private club using fake documents. It turned out that banks weren't as dumb as her rich friends. The bank discovered that she had faked everything and was deep in debt. Anna's life as a pretend German heiress was shattered when she was arrested and convicted for up to 12 years in prison. But hey, at least Netflix was a bit too interested in her story to pay over $300,000 to tell her story on TV. Now she's sitting pretty under house arrest with a stash of cash she can't even spend. While crime doesn't pay, it can land you a Netflix series, which is still pretty good. Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff is like today's modern-day rappers because he made millions of dollars in remixing things that have been done in the past. But instead of remixing songs, he remixed the entire Ponzi scheme, proving that people are still suckers for a good get-rich scheme. Madoff looked legit initially, especially after setting up a shop on Wall Street. He had his own investment company, and he convinced many clients that he could make their money grow. Just hand over $1 million and watch it double in a blink. That was his sales pitch. But unfortunately, he was like the world's worst magician because he made your money disappear. Instead of investing the money as promised, he just attracted more people and used their cash to keep the illusion of his investment company alive for years. In 2008, however, the cash ran dry. Madoff struggled to pay off the new investors while keeping the old ones happy. When people started asking for their money, the whole thing blew up into a nationwide scandal. It turned out that Madoff owed $65 billion to his clients. He didn't even have the cash to buy a cheeseburger. In 2009, he was charged with 11 felonies and got a one-way ticket to a 150-year prison sentence. An early release for this guy would have been 100 years, but he finally kicked the bucket in 2021 at 82. Elizabeth Holmes. At 19, Elizabeth Holmes turned her back on Stanford University, boldly declaring that she would become a girl boss. True enough, she did. Holmes built her company, Theranos, literally from the blood and sweat of her clients. Her tech was supposed to be promising. Her machine was supposed to say goodbye to those big needles and say hello to a compact way of testing blood samples. So if you had a deep fear of getting your blood sucked out of your body, her machine only needed a tiny drop to work its magic. But it turns out that her machine was as imaginary as a unicorn. Instead, she was using commercial machines to test blood samples. Despite that, she landed big deals with companies and even appeared on magazine covers. She was supposed to become the next girl boss of the century, but when journalists started asking pesky questions, the curtain fell and revealed her scam. By 2015, Theranos crashed harder than a Jenga tower. Instead of ruling the tech world, Holmes is ruling as the girl boss of the federal prison system. Fire Festival's Billy McFarland. Billy McFarland had a grand vision. He wanted to throw the mother of all parties while making a fortune. The only problem was that he had no idea how to organize a party. But that didn't stop him from pursuing his dream, even though it cost people millions of dollars. In 2017, Billy decided to pitch his Fire Festival as a promising, luxurious bash in the Bahamas. It was supposed to be the party of the century, complete with the best DJs, luxurious accommodations, and food money could buy. He sold it like a pro, even convincing Kendall Jenner and Bella Hadid to promote his event. Soon, every wannabe influencer was looking to go to the party of a lifetime. As for Billy, step 1, selling tickets, was done. But he didn't know there was supposed to be a step 2. With zero time, cash, or experience, Billy and his team turned a tropical paradise party into a disaster zone. Instead of posh villas and Michelin-level food, Fire Festival had tents and cheese sandwiches, seemingly made by a 10-year-old kid. The party blew up in smoke, leaving thousands stranded on an island. Naturally, the posh attendees used Daddy's credit card and sued Billy as soon as they returned. The fraudster got locked up in 2018, but got out in 2022. But with all the confidence in the world, Billy announced a sequel for Fire Festival. Surely something no one wants to miss. If you're looking for a fun online party with people you can discuss stuff with, you can join our Discord. We promise that we're not here to take your money. The Rockefeller case. They say that planning for the long term pays off. In Christian Karl Gerhartstreicher's case, he decided to launch an epic scheme that fooled countless people for decades. In 1995, Christian decided to become Clark Rockefeller, convincing everyone he was part of the famed Rockefeller dynasty, one of the planet's richest clans. His backstory was carefully crafted as he kept fooling people into believing he was a trust fund tycoon with millions. His act was so convincing, he won himself a literal boss for a wife named Sandra Boss, a successful businesswoman. They went on to have a daughter together, but not even their daughter knew she was the heir to an imaginary Rockefeller fortune. He kept climbing the social ladder, rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous and making them believe he was a loaded heir. He'd pay people using his charm when asked if he had any cash, but even his charm had its limits. His wife got fed up with their one-income lifestyle because she was essentially Miss Independent, paying for everything in the family. She eventually dug deep and discovered that Clark was just a simple German immigrant with nothing to his name. The divorce papers came faster than you when you're doing naughty things with your girlfriend. It turns out that Christian had a list of aliases and crimes. He had been dodging the law since 1985 for the disappearance of Sohus and his wife. Finally caught in 2013, he was sentenced to 27 years for their murder. The grand finale of his long con fooled everyone, including himself. Joseph Yellow Kid Whale. If Batman was called the Caped Crusader because of his cape, Joseph Whale was called the Yellow Kid because he always wore a yellow scarf. It became his signature look, but it was also more like yellow caution tape for people who encountered this con artist. Whale was the master of long-term conning, so he patiently built relationships and slowly manipulated people. In this style of scamming, he was like an artist. But while Picasso painted with colors, Whale used lies to color his cons. His favorite con was the gold brick scam, where he'd tell someone to sell a gold brick for him because he couldn't sell it himself. But the brick was just a painted block of lead. By the time people realized the truth, Whale had already led them astray and made off with a bag full of cash. He also sold raccoon coats and hired college kids to wear them around campus, convincing people that this was the newest fashion trend. Weeks later, he had turned frat boys into college icons and made huge profits selling cheap Trash Panda coats. It was the 1920s equivalent of selling knockoff Supreme hoodies, only with less hype. Whale probably had a rewards card for jail time: get caught 10 times, get 1 prison break for free. While he always found himself in prison for a few short stints, he got back in the game every time he got out, creating new scams that always found their mark. Robert Hendy Freegard. If you're looking for someone who took the James Bond act to the next level, Robert Hendy Freegard's story should be a real blockbuster movie. He pulled a huge con by posing as an MI5 agent, telling people that he was a spy and that they were in danger. By doing so, he swindled money, telling them he was there to keep the bad guys away. He took Arnold Schwarzenegger's "come with me if you want to live" line and turned it into a full-time job. Robert also embraced Bond's suave romantic act. He charmed women into thinking he was their knight in shining armor, convincing them to sleep with him. Sadly, he went from 007 to supervillain when he decided that kidnapping for ransom was his next move. But he wasn't too smart with his plan, as he got himself in jail. Maybe he forgot the memo that having the license to kill doesn't mean having the license to kidnap.